This morning, I'm very proud to be here, all the way from Redding, California, and I'm going to introduce the speaker this morning from Lakeside Camera and Imaging. They began as a single location, a traditional camera store in 1972. David Guidry is the son of Lakeside Camera and Imaging founders Rodney and Susan Guidry. Susan's in the audience. After graduating from LSU in 1991, a bout of low-grade poverty coupled with post-graduation letdown prompted Mr. Guidry to accept his father's offer to work in the family business. A passionate interest in black and white photography set the hook. An ongoing fascination with technological advancement taking place in the photo industry keeps Mr. Guidry interested. A great support staff in a dynamic and constantly evolving environment makes Mr. Guidry's job a dream. He is an avid photographer, athlete, patron of the arts, audiophile, jazz aficionado, deadhead, and LSU football fanatic. Please welcome David Guidry.
Thank you. Can you hear me? All right. Okay, just a little bit more about Lakeside. We're a two-location chain, if you can call it that. We're in Metairie, Louisiana, and Mandeville, Louisiana, which is the greater New Orleans area to a large extent. We were heavily affected by Hurricane Katrina at this location that you see on the left. This is the main location in Metairie, which is between the airport and the downtown area, French Quarter. And at the time on the Saturday prior to Katrina, we had 56 employees. When we came back from Katrina, due to people moving, being displaced, we retained, over the course of the next few months, around 25 of the original 56 could come back. So we had a huge cultural turnover. We rebuilt. Today we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 employees. I haven't checked. We're actively interviewing this week, and I'm going to tell you why in a minute. And we're happy to be around. I mean, it really is a dream job. And I'll share with you a little bit of our people strategy, which I've termed for the purpose of propaganda internally, the people war, and that's kind of how I see it. One of the things that's been talked about a lot in business press is that the battle for talent is heating up. It's occurring because the baby boom generation is getting older. We will have a smaller workforce. But not only that, when you have a market driven largely by the internet, price transparency across every marketplace and every product becomes available to every consumer. So from the standpoint of a traditional retailer, and while we have a web presence, I'm going to talk to you today as a traditional bricks and mortar retailer, one of the advantages we have is that we have a physical space in the community that we operate. The other advantage that we can have or choose to have is what kind of people we employ and who we let wear the uniform, or non-uniform, or however you like to approach that. Another thing that strikes me is that it's a potential competitive advantage, but then when I look at the figures, and this is from February, I'm a real statistics freak, I got to ask myself how it is that I can have two people that sell hardware for Lakeside Camera work in the same location, roughly the same age, from the same socioeconomic background, selling the same products at the same prices, getting the same training, and have the same opportunity, and one sells $37,000 in February and one sells $18,000 in February. How does that happen? Why does that occur? Am I capable of coaching up the $18,000 so that I've got two $37,000s? Or do I need to take and redeploy the $18,000 in another role or with another company and then try to get whatever that $37,000 salesman has? So it's bottom line economics that who we put in front of the customer really dictates the kind of financial performance and return we get in our business. One of the DEMA presenters was Chris Anderson, and I had heard a little bit about his long tail thing, but when he explained it, one of the things that struck me is, well, first of all, I agree with his premise. And my plan, I lit up, I thought, well, I use so many photo specialty products. We're inventing new and deploying new products every week at Lakeside. We bought an Indigo press, and I've got designers on site. We do all of our website design in-house, everything. And I'm into it. And I said, well, oh, that's so awesome. The long tail represents 50% of the sales that are possible, and I'm perfectly deployed. I know the game. I'm right there. But the part that he did not mention to you is that long tail, all those products, the thing that's not the hit, not the 4x6, As you go down the line, it requires an increasing amount of expertise. It requires an increasing amount of mental capacity, mental investment, and if you do not have that talent, if you do not recruit and promote and develop that talent within, you lose. So, ultimately, a company is the sum total of all the decisions being made in that company. It stands to reason that if your staff and you are making intelligent, well-informed, fast decisions in today's business environment, that your company will deliver better value to your customers and to your shareholders. That's one of the things. It's kind of funny. I just walk around my store sometimes. I'm like, are you delivering shareholder value? And they're like, sure, we have shareholders. I'm like, yeah, me. Let's get this going. Now, Good to Great is a book that's been talked about quite a lot. And what he talks about is if you can get the right people doing the right things, that you get lift. That, the right people in the right seats on the bus, and the bus sort of drives itself. Underlying that is some discipline. And that is something that we find, or I find, is very difficult to maintain because there's an awful lot of noise in business. Somebody calling in sick, printer broken, not getting, camera allotment on time, out of memory cards, whatever have you. There's an awful lot of fires that happen. And it really requires a lot of discipline from the standpoint of a business operator like me to be able to step away and think, step away and look at it and say, how do we maintain a disciplined culture? How are we disciplined enough to make sure that I'm putting the right people in the right spots so we get the lift? Another way to look at this also is that, in the industrial age, and I kind of I look back at how a mini lab was operated. It really was almost an industrial age job. Yes, we had some balancing to do, but for the most part, particularly early on in the early 80s, we had a situation where there's one type of print, and if I could get a competent printer and I could control my labor cost, it meant more profit to me. It meant more profit to the business. That has been flipped on its head now because all of the services that we provide require some level of customization, I'm finding. What I want you to think about is that in the industrial age, it paid access to the cheapest back meant that you had a competitive advantage. You had a competitive economic advantage over your competition, access to the cheapest back. And I find that a lot of people, when I talk about how much we pay employees, will cringe a bit and say, I can't afford to pay them that much. And that is industrial age thinking. In the information age, what you don't want to do is go to war with the cheapest mind. And you need to ask yourself if that's what you're doing. I got some of this information from Bill McCurry, and I'm not, I know that this is about 6 to 7 months old, but nonetheless, I think it holds true today. The average Gen Y will last 13 months in a job and go through 29 job changes in their working life. I'll tell you, I had a young man working for me in the graphics area. He came as a sound engineer from a record company, so he had some Macintosh experience. He understood operating systems and all this kind of stuff. And I had hired him about a year before the hurricane, and I hired him back after. We paid him through the hurricane. I gave him a Macintosh computer. He was paid very well. In my mind, I looked at him, and I think that I did everything that I possibly could to make Lakeside Camera a career for this young man. He had input in the direction that we'd be going. I took all of the business knowledge that I had about giving to my employees and running it as a cooperative like that, and he took a job with Lockheed Martin because he perceived that it was a step up last week. And I thought, what did I do? It must be a rejection of us or something like that. I got all these insane reactions, but the reality is that he's just behaving the way his peer group behaves. They don't stay forever, which is sort of discouraging if you intend to invest a lot in the younger generation because you don't get to hold your investment very long. But the flip side is if you don't invest in them, you go to war with the less intelligent and the less informed and the less trained, then you really have problems. They see impatience as a virtue. That's certainly true. They'll take good now compared to great from a year now. They're so cynical, they do not buy into the notion that you will take care of them in the future. And you know what? There's an awful lot of evidence out there from companies in the media that prove that that's true. They want it, and they want it now. They're natives to digital. They need to see development path as rapid and meaningful. So a lot of times when someone new comes on, I deploy them. If I see that they have a special talent, we develop a service around it and let them go. Get them in the game as quickly as possible so that they feel that rapid development. Again, this is something that I got from Bill. 93% of Australian university students said they applied for a job online. This, after Katrina, there was a whole lot going on with the labor market because it displaced most people who weren't homeowners, moved out of town. And so all of the fast food restaurants had $2,500 signing bonuses and $10 an hour to start. And we were like, what? Yeah, and this was just a basic entry-level thing. So we naturally had to pay more. And as we were seeking help, because there was such a shortage of labor, there was an artificial test bed for this. We put ads in the Times-Picayune, the local newspaper, and got not one single phone call, not one single application, nothing for any of the positions that we put in for graphics or sales or anything else. Somebody from the pro group suggested, well, why don't you try Craigslist.com, which I was peripherally aware of, but never did really do anything with. Went to Craigslist, New Orleans, posted the job, 8 resumes. It just goes to show you the people that are involved in technology are using technology in their daily lives, and they are not looking at traditional sources like we are. So there's been a fundamental shift. They're looking, they're looking for feedback and collaboration. I've certainly found that that's true. This is why I insist on putting people into play right away. For instance, we hired a young woman who is teaching at Southeastern University in Hammond, which is north of New Orleans, and she works 4 days a week. One of the things I found out from her after she was hired, and she seemed like a reasonable person, I found out that she had worked for the photographer Arnold Newman, cataloging all of his stuff. And she's an academic, and part of her curriculum is library sciences and stuff, so I thought, you will be in charge of cataloging all the shoebox stuff that we do, all the scanning of the stuff. And I had a guy who had negatives of every type and variety from 1920 on. I put her in charge of it. She documented meticulously for him, and this is an ongoing scan job. But, I find that as entrepreneurs, as owners, we have to be mining what these talents are. And, her talent may have been something else, but whatever it was that I was going to find, I was going to put that into play right away. This I find to be true. If you're not happy, well, let me just speak, I'll speak personally. I find when I'm home at night and I'm churning and I'm uncomfortable and I'm losing sleep and stuff's coming out sideways on the ones I love, when all that stuff's going on, it's normally related back to a people problem at work. It's not a machine problem. It's not a tactical problem. It's not a problem with the template. It's not a problem with accounting. Those things certainly cause frustrations. But those are the things that we can hit head on. Those are the things that we can sort of say, well, we'll fix it, machine's broken, let's fix it. Need a new paper stock, we'll fix it. Accounting's not right, let's investigate until we get the numbers right. It's the people problems that keep us awake. And those are the things that can rob a lot of the joy about being an entrepreneur, is if we allow those things to sit with us too long. So the question that we need to ask is, are all of your current employees eligible for rehire? And this is something that we do every several months. I'll take a list and I'll go in the executive committee meeting and I'll say, okay, grade them. Are they A, B, C, whatever? And then I want to look and say, well, so-and-so's a C, and they were C last time, and it just doesn't seem like they're going anywhere. Is there anywhere else we can, make them an A? Have we done everything we could to make them an A? And if the answer is no, then it's time to make a move. But that's the discipline part that we need. So the system that I stumbled upon is a system called top grading. And basically, the deal, I know this is an improper PowerPoint slide because there's too many words, but read them anyway. The the thing about top grading is that you seek out the best candidate for a given position at the dollar amount that you're willing to pay. And people often say, well, you know, yeah, you could probably get the world's greatest delivery person for $60,000 a year. Maybe. I don't know. But that's not really realistic, and that's not what you want to pay. So if you assume that your delivery person is going to be a $10 an hour person, if that's what you can allocate, then it is your responsibility as the principal of your organization to ensure that you get one of the top 10% of delivery driver candidates in your marketplace, in your geographic region that you're going to draw from. Now, there's a procedure and a system that you can go by to make sure that's what's happening. I'm going to refer you. I don't work for these guys. I was just exposed to this. Jeff and Brad Smart, there's a toolkit on it. They have a DVD deal. And basically, it tells you how to interview and how to go at it. I'll give you a little bit of information on it. Most people take in applications, they may do a little bit of screening, and may talk to them at the counter, and when they sit down and interview, at least this is the way it came sort of naturally to me, we sit down with someone, and anyone can fake it. Anybody can fake their life if you just deal with them in the moment. When we interview and we ask them how they feel and why they want the job and why they're interested in photography, you're getting such a thin slice of what this person's really like. You're making a decision to allocate so many resources towards training them, the cost of acquisition, all that stuff, and you're basing it on a very thin slice of time that you have with them. The trick that these guys advocate is to go back through their lives with them, from grade school on, in a long interview, and try to figure out what it is that they're really like. And I'll explain about that in a second. These DVDs have little flash components that show you how to interview, so if you are interested in it, contact them. One of the things that I have difficulty, and this is part of the discipline thing from me, is that a lot of times we focus only on the visible behavior. And people say, but I tried, or it was just a mistake and all this stuff. But if we take that visible behavior that we get every day from the people that work for us, what often we don't realize is it's just the tip of the iceberg. So in the hiring process, it's critically important to dig a little deeper and find out their willingness and their attitude. And their willingness and their attitude will reveal itself to you if you go through their life and ask the proper questions in a non-judgmental fashion. You can find out what clubs they were involved in high school, what were their activities, what did they like to do in their off time, what did they really like about their first job. And if you do it in the right way, if you employ the proper interview technique, you're going to find that they really just capitulate their true self to you. I mean, it's just, this is who I am. And then it's not about, I'm going to be a great employee and I'm hip, slick, and cool and my shoes are shined. It's all about the content of their character. If you can grab that, if you can distill that and hire on that basis, you'll get, I think you'll find that your staff is much better. Underneath the willingness and attitude is the beliefs. I think you got to be a really good interview to dig at that and get at it. But, but that's what really drives the performance behavior at the top end. So what we do is we employ a very specific interviewing process in order to try to get at some of this information and make a more intelligent decision. What we do is we have a call for resumes. Resumes look good. We'll have a 15-minute screening interview. It doesn't make sense to waste time on a big top grading interview, a long 2-3 hour affair, if this person is not really into it. So the 15-minute interview is basically a check-in, like where's your head at, why you want the job, what are you doing, what's going on now, do you seem like you fit, do you have the kind of appearance that we want in front of our customers, all that kind of stuff. If they pass that screening interview, then we'll go into the top grading interview and dig, and just dig. Now once you got the proper mix, the next step in making sure that you have a top-graded organization is to continually sell the vision. This is the part that I think we fall short on a lot of times because it's almost like, well, I studied to be, I wanted to be a history professor, and I've always liked to teach, and I always like to talk, and I like to impart knowledge and share. And that's come in real handy in selling the vision in my company. What we really need to do is make sure we're getting the discretionary effort. We can get the best person, but if we don't continually feed them and teach them and sell them the vision and give them the company DNA and repeatedly do it. I'm going to give you a method to do that in a minute. We don't get that last 20%. And that last 20% makes it to where you either have an enthusiastic customer base or you don't. It's the difference between, hey, how are you, Martha? How you doing? And may I help you? That is the difference. So how do we pull that discretionary effort? Well, you got to start with good clay, but then you got to mold it. One of the companies that I learned about in a program, one of the business programs at MIT, is a Container Store. Now, it's an independently run store. I heard the owner speak, and it touched me the way that they approach employees and how they do it. They will only open 1 or 2 stores a year if it makes sense. They are not on a tear to just, take over the world. They have a good value proposition, but everybody is in the game. And in 2004, one driver took home $5,000 for 10 years of perfect driving. Now, the Fortune 500 100 best companies, they've won it a couple of times. What is it about them that makes it so? This guy employed a system of core values. Now, we adopted the same strategy. Long time ago, we spent, 2 or 3 days with a consultant developing a mission statement. We printed up nice posters of a mission statement. We stuck it on the wall. Pretty soon, it molded into the wallpaper. Nobody lived it. Nobody breathed it. It just was something on the wall. It didn't make any sense. In fact, it was I just felt sort of foolish having it up there because we weren't living it, and it was like, it was too Dilbertish. It was pathetic. So once I understood the core value system and how to keep it alive, I'll run through Lakeside's core values. First of all, no matter what the circumstance, comfort thy customer. Now, some young people have difficulty with this. They think that means give the customer anything they want. No, you don't give them a free camera if that's what they think they're due. What it means is that you be empathetic. Empathy is a great tool and a great face for your company, and this is how we teach empathy. No matter what the circumstance, comfort thy customer. Provide instant access to fantastic service. This is a big pet peeve of mine. Most service is horrible. Most of you who shop locally in your communities, you realize they're undertrained, they don't care, they're slow to get to you, you're an intrusion on whatever else they're doing. I can't stand it. It's a pet peeve of mine. Instant access to fantastic service. What do I mean by instant? I mean right now. When they come in, they need to be greeted and helped. Right now. We have another one, because we're in the photo business, produce the most beautiful picture possible from any given source. Now, this was a tough one. Because we had people say, but am I supposed to open every 4x6 in Photoshop? No, that's not what that means. What that means is, given the notion that you can reasonably make something better and improve the quality, that's the side you err on. Because I do not want my employees at all making a decision because they didn't make something right for a customer because they were aware of the costs. Now, they're not that often worried about my costs, unless their check is a little off. But I wanted to sort of, and let me just be clear on something. I love my staff. I live at Lakeside. I love it. They're great people. I have a great time with them. I would not want to do anything else. But we have to set the rules. We have to set the expectations. One of the ways we do that is with these core values. So my deal is, look, if it can be made better reasonably within the workflow that we've set up, then you make it better. You don't make a decision that you're not going to color correct something because you're worried about my labor cost. Most beautiful picture possible from any given source. Never let them down. Stick to promises and always deliver on time. That's simple. If we don't deliver on time, we lose. The quality perception drops. So that's a core value. We make a promise to a customer. I expect us to stick with it. 1 equals 3. This comes from hiring. And this has really worked in my favor. 1 equals 3. Never let temporary demands cause us to waver from hiring the best people. I knew we were on to something when I hammer these core values over and over and over. And I've got somebody who has a desperate need to fill a position. We're running some overtime, and they have a set of applicants, and we sit down and we say, what's going on? And they say, you know what? I have a couple of applicants, but they're really not the best. We can live like it is for now until we get the right person. because a bad hire sets the organization back. It lowers your competitive advantage. And I didn't have to make that decision or teach that. That came from repeating the core values over and over again. The idea is that 1 good is equal to 3 average and 1 great is equal to 3 good. That comes into play with the labor strategy that I'll tell you about in a minute. And then the other thing is that your worth to Lakeside Camera Photo Works is dependent upon how much you help those around you get better. I have to show up, or I choose to show up, every day in the same environment that my staff shows up. And I want the kind of environment where there's open sharing and support, and when somebody looks like they need help, you help them, and we don't hoard information. Now, do I run up against these things? Absolutely, but it's out in front of them every week and at every meeting that's what we expect. You know, you might be the greatest salesperson in the world, but if you're tripping up your coworkers to get to the thing and you're not helping them get better and you're not helping them sell and you're not supporting them and running to get a filter when they're in front of a customer closing a sale, you're really not worth what you think you are to us. Your worth is dependent upon how much that you help those around you get better. So these core values are a handful of rules that remain constant. We don't waver from these things. And this is the part where the discipline comes in. You got to be willing to fire for it. Somebody violates the rules and they hurt the company, they violate the core values. Now, I'm a reasonable person and I know what it costs to replace people, so there should be documentation leading up to it. But if somebody demonstrates clearly that they're unwilling to follow any of those core values, you've got to let them go. And you've also got to be willing to take a significant financial hit. This idea came from the Container Store. Here's what they do. They pay twice as much than the competition locally, and they give 160 hours worth of training. How many of you give 160 hours of training to new people? Do you? It's an outrageous amount, right? Is it worth it? Yeah. They opened a store in Manhattan. This is a retail place that sells essentially Tupperware and other things like that. They had a retail store that was open in Manhattan. They had 35 spots available to staff it initially, and they were flooded with 5,000 applications for reputation and the way they do things. The pay was good, the support is good, they train you up, they give a reason to work beyond profit by following core values, delivering value to customers and to their people. Phenomenal. They can cherry pick the best people in any market they go into. Now, what about pay? Well, Katrina made our labor costs go way up because of the scarcity of people, of workers in the city after the storm. But we had already embarked on raising the pay scale, making a conscious decision to do so. Let's take a look at Costco and Sam's Club. I think, and I have not looked at the Wall Street Journal today, I think it's always a danger to quote figures because something could have changed and Costco could have bottomed out last night. I have no idea. But they are eating Sam's Club's lunch. They pay an average of $15.97 an hour. Sam's is at $11.52. 9.8 of sales is Costco's labor cost, or was at the time that I put this slide together, whereas Sam's Club, 17% of Sam's Club sales was labor cost. Costco's obviously getting more per square foot than Sam's Club, and they have lower turnover. Now, the turnover figure is pretty critical. We already know that Generation Y, if you're employing young people, it's hard to hold them. The game needs to be that we extend their tenure with us when they're productive for as long as we possibly can. It costs Sam's Club somewhere in the neighborhood of $2,500 every time they have to replace a person. So as long as Costco can keep their turnover lower than Sam's Club is spinning, spinning, spinning. New people are less productive. They don't know the system. It costs money to train them. It costs money to replace them. They're spinning their wheel. What we want is less people paid more with a lower total wage cost. That's the game. That is exactly what we need to do. And so what we did when we looked at it, and I can tell you from experience, Now, we have incentives, we have commission programs, we have spiffs, we have other contests that we run. We put specific incentives to sell particular products that we're trying to highlight. But fundamentally, hourly employees, and this is what I can speak to because I'm a retailer, I'm a bricks and mortar retailer, they look at what you pay them hourly, they think that's what they're paid. To some degree. Some are savvy enough to look at the whole check, but when it comes to it, they're a $8 an hour employee, or I'm making 15, or I'm making 10. The quality of employee, the quality of individual that we get for 15 is light years beyond what we get for 10. You put an ad in the paper for 10, what comes in and who's willing to take that job for 10? Put an ad in the paper for 15, forget that we got all the other stuff on top. But you put an ad for 15 base plus the commission and stuff, the quality of the person that comes in and the quality of the person willing to accept that job is light years beyond. And I'll tell you that the $37,000 guy I hired at $15 an hour, he's my top salesperson, I would not have got him at 10. Was he worth it? Whew. Selling twice as much as the person who's just showing up. So selling the vision, if we go forward with that, I always have an agenda, and this was the last quarter of last year's agenda that I'll share with you. I've got a series of several meetings that I'll tell you about in a second during every week that focuses on different parts of the business. The priorities that we had, because we had an Indigo Press and that was new to our business, we wanted to establish Indigo-based services, we wanted to increase gross margin and profitability, we wanted to win the people war, and we wanted to grow cash. That was the 4 items that I put on the table for my executive team that we wanted to accomplish. And I'll tell you, we did every one of them. But they had to know that's what we were after, and I had to coach on it and talk about it and talk about it and talk about it. We have every Tuesday a cash report that goes out to the executive committee that shows exactly where we are with payables 2 months out. We know exactly where we are. By measuring it, reporting it, meeting on it, keeping it alive, we grew cash. Well, the people war was part of it. So how are we going to do it? We made a conscious decision to pay more than the competition. Okay. If Victoria's Secret in the mall is hiring people for $11, I'm going to offer 13 right off the bat. And I'm going to build it into my cost structure to begin with. Because I want to attract the better people. I want to take their better people. People who want to move up. People who are employed. A players are never unemployed. Never. We wanted to hire the best people. We want to employ less people. Now, I told you, I love my staff. I love them. But every human that puts on the Lakeside shirt and signs their paperwork is a living, breathing problem. Am I lying? I'm not kidding. So, you know what? Again, I'm showing up every day. I want to enjoy myself. I want to enjoy my career. If I'm going to have to deal with the normal human problems, I want as few of them as I can. And, you know, it's not surprising that the really quality people present you with less problems. So, increasing productivity was critical because we can't just go around hiring a bunch of high-priced people if we don't get return. But that, again, points to the discipline, because when you don't get the return, what are you going to do about it? Do you sit with it? Keep our people great through training and keep them emotionally engaged. Big component. How do we do it? Well, I use those core values I shared with you. And this is the way we meet. Actually, the executive committee meeting is on Tuesday. The reason it's on Tuesday is that the accounting department felt like they couldn't get they were rushed to get the reports together that we needed. So I said, fine, we'll move it to Tuesday. So Tuesday 10, executive committee meeting. Leaders on Thursday, 7 a.m. Indigo meeting Tuesday at 9 a.m. That was during the Indigo initiative when we were developing products. Now we have a production meeting where we shift it. You know, none of this stuff is set in stone just so long as you're meeting on the things that you dictate or goals for your company. We have a merchandise meeting on Wednesday at 9:45 that I rotate some salesmen in and out on so that I get their input about what's selling, what's not selling. And we have a general staff meeting, and this is what people love. 7:30 a.m. every Saturday. You know who's in front of them every Saturday? 7:30 a.m.? Me. I prepare it every week. I teach them every week. It's the company DNA. It's the vision. I've got to inject them with that. Where else are they going to get it? I can't really rely on that to happen other ways. It spreads from me. Other people buy in. We get buy-in. But I feel compelled that that's really important. And you know, when people are hired, they say, what? 7:30? I go out on Friday. Well, you know what? We're closed on Sunday. We close at 6 o'clock or 6:30 during the week. And that's part of the trade-off. We understand you want to have a life. I want a life too. I want that store shut down on Sunday. I don't want to worry about it. I want quality of life. We're paying attention to that. The cost for that is that you show up at the 7:30 meeting on Saturday. It's mandatory. This is the meeting format, and it's followed every week without fail. First thing, we start with good news. You want to get the alpha waves going. So I say, you know, I'll call on people or I'll call on volunteers. What's good? You know, let's start with good news. Somebody will raise their hand. And the rule is that you share one business good news. That comes first. Like, I had a great experience with a customer. This is what happened. We were able to solve the problem. We made a customer for life. Okay, that's great. What's your personal good news? And that's part of it. You got to share one business and one personal. That personal might be, you know, well, my son started T-ball, got a hit last night. He was really excited. Oh, that's cool. See, I don't know if you guys have this, but if you have retail folks and production folks, is there not a never-ending battle between those two? They didn't write it up right. They didn't do it right. They're not on time. They don't ask if we can get it done. Oh, there's a battle, right? Their roles and the pressure that they feel naturally put them at odds. But if over a long enough time, the retail person gets to hear that the lab person just got a new cat, if that's what the personal good news is, there's a humanizing effect among the staff. And I think it's really critical to push that through. We get to know each other a little bit better, and it's simple, and it's a little hokey in the beginning, but people buy in. So one business, one personal good news. The second thing is numbers. Now, I share numbers freely. I could call my shop right now and ask anybody who answered the phone, what's the total right now, today? Where are you? How much have you sold? How much did Adam sell? All these things. I mean, I can ask them. They can see it. I don't care. Now, it's on a need-to-know basis. They don't look at my financial statement. The executive team does. The meetings go need-by-need basis. But the numbers that I'm going to talk about in this general Saturday meeting are going to be, you know, what are our items per sale? What's the merchandise margin? What's the services pace against goal? What are the things? How many warranties did we sell against cameras? All these things are I share so that we have a benchmark. That's a brief period. I'm only going to take about 5 minutes. But if you don't keep score, you know, it's like bowling without looking at the pins. I believe you got to show it to them. And I've heard some people say, well, I don't want to share that information. It's not their business how well or how poorly we're doing. Well, okay, that's fine. But if you're doing well and you pull up in a Jaguar, they know how well you're doing. They already know that. They know. They know you're the owner. They know why you're doing it. We're talking business metrics as it relates to their performance. Then we go through a section of customer employee data. Now, remember, in good news, we already talked about our success. We started the meeting with success. When, like, I called you all together to talk about where we're falling short. Not like that at all. Start with good news, get excited. Next segment, customer employee data. What do people not like that we're doing? What do we need to stop doing? Where did we fall short? Did we mess up? Was there something about a service that someone didn't like the way we delivered it? Now, if you're careful about how you handle it, you'll get the stuff you need to improve upon without calling out people's mistakes. That's also 5 minutes. Now, the rock, or what I call the rock, is what we build the meeting around. That is, I forgot something really important. The good news, business, you have to relate that good news back to a core value. That is a key component. I totally skipped over a key component of keeping the core values alive. If we look at the core values, if you just stick them on the wall, they die. If you keep them involved in meetings through personal stories, they stay alive. They become a working part of your organization. So when someone says, you know, somebody came in, they needed a folded card, they had a party on Saturday, and we were able to push it through. Well, okay, what core value does that relate? Well, that's provide instant access to fantastic service. And so helped them, and that's 1 equals 3 because so-and-so is doing a great job. Yeah, you know. So we keep the core values alive through the good news. So when we get to the rock, that is what the meeting's about. I take about a half an hour to hammer one topic. One topic. The tendency that a lot of people have when it comes to meetings is to throw a whole bunch of topics at people in one meeting. We're going to fix everything. You need to know about this, and we need you to fix this, and don't forget about this, and you rush through it, you give a big meeting, and I find that that's much less effective than if you just take, how do we deliver photo finishing orders? What is the mechanical process, and how do we want to present it? How do we deliver photo finishing orders? Take 30 minutes to knock that down. Now, if we meet roughly 40 times a year on Saturdays, because sometimes I call it off in December. People are tired. You know, it just depends. I use it when I need to. But we're meeting at least 40 times a year. That's 40 pieces of information that have really been chewed on by everybody present. And it makes a huge difference. Not the first week, but after the 20th week, it makes a huge difference. But we as entrepreneurs or leaders in our organization absolutely have to be disciplined enough to set the agenda and follow through with it and deliver great content. Because there's not a single young person that wants to show up at my meeting at 7:30 on Saturday, ever. They never want to. On the 30th one they go to, they still don't want to go. But they're always happy that they came. And that's the litmus test. When you see them buoyant after the meeting, that's when I feel like I've done my job. What can we stop doing? And then we review the results. This is the part where you can tell who's struggling. So if your staff's in front of you, or you're doing it in a small meeting, if you go through and you say, well, everybody get that? Everybody, what do you think? Do you think this is a good idea, the course we're taking? If you see people, then you know who's not on board with your agenda, and you can maybe go seek them out and coach them toward the light, you know? Another thing that I've found, how many of you have been having people problems with a particular employee, and you're losing sleep, and you're struggling, but they have some kind of core competence in your business that you feel you can't live without. And finally, they either reject themselves or you've had so much enough of it that you have to get rid of them. And then 2 weeks later, you say to yourself, God, I should have done that a long time ago. How many times has that happened? I mean, so my whole thing is now, I don't want to live with it for that long. It's counterproductive for everyone. About 2 weeks before the storm hit, I hired an outside CFO. Now, we're not big enough. At the time, Lakeside, we were doing $6.5 million in revenue out of 2 locations. We are not big enough to have a full-time, real, honest-to-goodness CPA, MBA, CFO on staff every day. So through some associations, I found a guy to fill the position that I was looking for, and that was a part-time CFO. Now, we're going to pay this guy to come meet with us once a month. We're going to turn all our financial information over to him. That was a very foreign concept to a closely held family business. But we did it because we recognized that we didn't have what it took to really drill into the financial metrics to drive the company. So we hired this guy. Took a leap of faith. This was where we ended up with gross profit, and it was a direct result of hiring a part-time CFO that we meet with once a month. And you know what? This guy is like a coach, and I hate him. I hate the guy. He comes in every month, and he asks me, how come we sold an adapter for a projector, and we only got 30 points on it? I'm like, that's one item out of the whole thing we sold that month. Shouldn't we just skip over this? You know, I don't want to have to answer to why my margin dropped on memory cards, particularly not in front of my executive team, which is where we meet. I hate that. I hate when he asks me how come something's not that way. But you know what? I pay him to come in and aggravate me like that. And the result has been right there. Now, would I be doing that if he wasn't in our employ? Nope. Definitely not. Absolutely not. So I've come here, and yes, we're feeling margin pressure, and I understand where it comes from, but my margin is higher now than it was 2 years ago because I went out and sought the help that we needed to get it done. That's part of winning the people war. you know, an analogy a lot of people like to use is the Tiger Woods analogy. When he fired his coach, his game went down. He hired his coach back, his game goes up. We all do need a coach. I'm a member of the Young Entrepreneurs Organization. I meet monthly with a group of 7 entrepreneurs. One runs a shipping company in the Gulf, supporting the rigs. There's a custom home builder. There's a kitchen cabinet retail chain. And I get the support and insight that I need into running a business from my position, from these guys on a monthly basis. We just had a 2-day retreat. One lady owns a really large food service company, meat packing and all that stuff. And you know what? I come to find that the things that they struggle with as entrepreneurs and leaders of their company are the same things I struggle with. And if I don't have an outlet and a place that I can learn how they handle those things in a coaching relationship, then I'm less effective. So we went out and got a CFO. I joined Young Entrepreneurs. And I take part in educational opportunities outside of PMA. I'm always at DEMA. I'm always at PMA. I'm always at the Pro Group Convention. Sometimes I go to IPI. I'm always involved in my industry, but I also step outside of my industry for some educational opportunity every year because I think that's what it takes for us to deliver that back to our organizations. So I would say don't be shy about going and getting the expertise you need outside. And lastly, before I ask some questions, you know, when you get back, how well did it run? That's your litmus test. That's your litmus test for how well your people have bought into your philosophy, whether they act out of your DNA or they don't. That's a litmus test to tell you whether they buy into your core values, whether you've stated them or you haven't stated them. When you get home, you got the perfect test. So I appreciate you coming this morning and hearing me, and I hope it's been helpful. Thank you. You can ask questions if they want. If anybody has any questions, I'll answer them. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the importance of getting that discretionary effort.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that, not so much with new employees, but employees who've been with you for a long period of time? How do you sustain that with people who've been there for years?
Repeat the question.
The question was, when you have had employees for a long period of time, how do you get discretionary effort out of them and sustain the discretionary effort? The number one way is the meetings, through the meetings. So, and the way that we do that, again, is we have that set of core values, and if we repeat it and keep it alive through personal stories and strategy that supports those core values, that should go down. Now, I was also told a while back by someone who is far more successful than I am in the photo business, I don't know if they're still in the photo business, that you should never shrink from your confrontations, and that change is good. In fact, this guy had a sales manager at the time, and I actually flew to his facility to talk to his sales manager because I thought, sales manager for selling pictures? This guy smokes cigars, really cool. I thought, man, that's awesome. I talked to the guy a few years later. I said, how's that sales manager? Oh, we got rid of him. He says, change is good. You got to change. So I think, fire him.
On your older employees again, the employees that have been with you a long time, how do you get them to come up to speed with some of the younger employees, right? You don't want to get rid of them because of their knowledge and their core of what they do, their expertise. How do you bring them up to speed to today's standard?
I think it's like anything else with managing people. We have to set the expectations clear. The question was, how do I bring them up to speed with what? Helping new people?
Well, no, bring them up to speed as far as sales. In other words, how do you bring them up to today's standards as far as what you want?
Well, that's going to fall under some of the sales initiatives that you put out. I mean, I think it's very important to bring them up to speed on sales. It's very important to have and publish the metrics. In other words, keep score as to what's expected. And then you have to have the discipline and willingness to confront underperformance, again, reiterate your expectation, and when the expectation is finally not met, either because they are unwilling or unable, you either can redeploy them internally or redeploy them externally. There's no other way about it. And when we shrink from those kind of confrontations, we send a message that's far louder We say we either are serious about what we tell you or we're not serious about what we tell you. And I can tell you right now, I have a full staff. I mean, like, there are enough, like, every seat has a body in it right now. And we're interviewing 10 people this week.
Now, would that come up under your rock?
Well, under the rock, I might talk about why we are not converting warranties, and then I would go into some presentations on how to convert warranty sales for, hardware sales. We want to coach up. I mean, and that's the thing. I think it's really important that the question we ask is, have we done everything that we could do to help this person be successful? If the answer is yes, and they're still not successful, then we have an obligation to everybody else in the company that they move on. It's an obligation. That's my job. I don't have to like my job. I don't have to relish the firing. I just have to do it. Anybody else? Yes?
When you say everything possible to let the employee, like, wouldn't it be nice to have a helicopter to pick them up from home and bring them to work? You know, is that everything, or like where do we draw the line?
I think the question is, what's everything when you say you'll help them to perform, to get them up to speed? Well, you can define that. That's the beauty of it. You're the king of your organization, I presume. Be the king. You set your standard. I mean, if it's all what you're willing to do. And I think when it goes back to, like, what I just thought of is the policy manual that we have. I didn't want to spell out everything that's okay and not okay. To, personal appearance and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of like, look, we spell it out as business casual, and we reserve the right to determine if it's not. So if you come in with 5 piercings because you had a good time on Friday night, that's not okay. Might be okay for you. I mean, it's okay with me if you do whatever you want to do, I tell them. You can do whatever it is you want to do. You just can't do it here.
Just one more thing. The idea you have of meeting with good news management,
Right.
that'd be a great morale builder for the good news department. That'd be a great in-house boost that you share personal thing with most companies don't really care.
The comment that he's made is about the good news portion of the meeting and being a morale booster in the business. It is. And if you watch what has happened when you try to have a meeting, if you just start to attack problems, people, it shuts them down. I think what we have to do, and the fact is that even when we are performing our worst, when I am as frustrated as I can be, there are successes happening. And we should call them out. We should acknowledge them. And I'll tell you what kind of happens is most of the time it's one sales associate praising another's activity. And that can't be bad. Can't be bad. It's not me saying it. Oh, that's just his pet. No. It's legit. Yes, sir.
Just a ballpark figure. You were saying maybe 20, 50 employees to kind of get where you should be.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of volume do you do with that?
Yeah, we were at about 6 million pre-storm. Now, I'm in a crazy environment. So, if you because Katrina, we have neighborhoods that are completely still.
What about pre-Katrina?
We were at 6.6 million. We had 54 to 56 people at the time. But, that's going to change. You're like, I can tell you through the help of that CFO, I was able to quantify the break-even point for every dollar amount given our gross margin. I know what someone has to sell on average in order to make themselves worth it. I know that already. Before I set what it is I'm willing to pay. So the decision becomes, if we're going to hire a salesperson, I want an A player. I want really somebody who can take what we're trying to do and make it their own and put it into play with my customers. If I determine, well, you know what, to get that person in our marketplace, it's a local thing because that's where you're hiring from. If I determine that it's going to take $20 an hour to do that, then I know what they have to sell if I'm going to pay them that. I already know it. I know, and I've got FICA figured in. I've got all that other stuff.
You got some return on
Every one of them. There's no mystery. They either achieve or they don't. We want to hire for what we need, not what we can afford.
Question, you set those expectations to your employees before you hire them.
Yes.
That's a key point in the interview process. Did you do this or?
Well, even the question is, do we set that expectation in the interview process? Really, if you're using the top grading format, you've already determined that this person is used to a system like that, used to being monitored, and has achieved. So, you know, the candidate's already one of those people. So if you're sitting there interviewing somebody and you say, well, you know, how was your last job, you know, working as a waiter in, you know, a fine restaurant or whatever? Oh, you know, it was good. Well, what'd they measure you on? Well, most of the time, they're going to measure them on how many desserts, or did they sell the special, and all this kind of stuff. Well, what was the system that they had? Oh, well, you know, you had to always sell 50% of the dinners had to be sold with a dessert, and then you got some kind of... Well, how did you do? I did pretty good. No, I mean, like, how did you... What was the number? Oh, well, who was your supervisor? Can I call him? And would it be okay if I talked to him? Oh, well, you know, I don't know where they are, actually. You know... So the point is, if you just pull and you're non-judgmental, just pull the information, you'll know that this person has had measurables and either achieved or didn't achieve.
My question and comment was more in the interview process. If you say, you know, I'm interviewing you for a sales position, right? That's what we're talking about, and it's going to pay about $20 an hour. You understand that I'm going to expect you to sell, you know, X many dollars a day.
Oh yeah, all of it's lined out. This is what...
Because that'll run them away if they're not up to that. Because you're telling them, if you're not up to that, don't.
Well, really, we want to make it a buyer's market. Because if you flash a high enough number in your market, but if you're willing to pay more than everybody else for a similar job in your marketplace, you get the best candidates, and they want to come and get that money.
You sell a lot of chaff, you've got to knock away from that.
Correct.